Alright, people. Alright, let's get this show on the road. I gotta just do the share, then can take this forward. Right, so un momento, people. Let's so as soon as I've right, okay, that's done. All right. إن الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فسلام الله عليكم ورحمته تعالى وبركاته. Well, God, people, I am still injured. God damn it. Ow, I didn't know how somebody could actually ever pull a muscle on their neck. God damn, have I figured that out. You know, you see some of these people sometimes in this kind of neck cast that they've got, and you think, what a blag. But I seriously know it is not a blag. God damn it, really. You know what? I thought by yesterday night it was feeling okay. And then I thought, I know, I'll super relax it as much as I can. Fill up the bath with all that muscle soak thing. And then later on, when I've taken a nap today, as vampires do, and woken up, oh my God, it was in agony. It's like you know, when you've pulled a muscle on your back, it's like that, but in your neck. Whoa. So I suppose it's not as debilitating as your back, because you can still move about. It's just when you gotta kind of look, you feel like, I don't know, like Robocop or the Terminator in trying to slow motion. I really felt it when I was driving yesterday, and as I had to kind of like just pull out and take a look, I realized I was having to, oh my God, it was straining my yeah, well, anyway, that's enough of my agony. Let's get back to what is going on. Yeah, so here I am. Let's just straightening that up a bit. Now sometimes I don't know who's been fiddling with my stuff here, but they mess up the whole. So right, so I know because of the short notice today, I don't know how many questions have come through, so I'm going to check them out. But feel free to post any questions, and let's see what we can do. Let's see what kind of a rumble we can make, people. Right, so questions. Right, so where are they? Right, well, here are some. I'll try and mix them up. So, live and going back, forth. Tell me about it. I've lost. This is what I mean. I do all these, and I lose mega weight. God damn. Well. Anyway, see, this is what's making me think I should hit the gym after this, but then I'm thinking my neck, I should just rest. Then I'm thinking maybe I should just hit the gyms, adjust to a different, you know, dilemmas. Right. does the Sharia differentiate between mental illness and jinn possession? What a question. Right, I'll tell you what, let's take that as an opening up question. What a question to open up with, huh? What is the take of the Sharia on jinn possessions? Look at that, a more pertinent question. What's the drink I'm on? My drink is often a cocktail, so I mix up a hell of a lot of stuff, and people are probably thinking, what on earth does he mix up? You see, Robin, now iced tea, I just ordered myself some iced tea because that's what I'm going to switch to, because I take way too much of this stuff. But this I just mix up loads of stuff in there, Sprite, Zero, Pepsi Max, energy drinks, you name it. Anything, anything, a bit of, anything that sparks life. Now, jinn possession. People, I have answered this before. I've done a detailed video on, it was a Q&A on jinn possession between fact and fiction within Islam. And I've tequila in my drink. Well, I couldn't possibly say, people. I couldn't possibly say. Now, so I have highlighted before. Look, there are no such things as demonic possessions in Islam. Okay, I hate to break it to people, but it's true. We do not have these spirits flying around that possess people, right? And then they flip and have all these. And I've given a very detailed explanation to all of that before, so you can feel free to watch that. But in summary, I will highlight that, look, these beliefs that people have to do with demonic possessions, these are in essence more a kind of cultural superstitious belief that people have. What they do is they superimpose Islam onto it. So that's what you need to understand. There is nothing in the Quran or Sunnah at all that speaks of jinn possessions at all in any Sahih Sunnah. I don't mean there's hadith which are weak and there's hadith which are problematized, but any clear cut, there is nothing established like that in the Quran, okay, in the Sunnah. The Quran, which is more interesting in this topic, actually tells us to believe, or the Quran actually presents a belief which is opposed to jinn possessions. So the Quran actually teaches that on the Day of Judgment, the shaitan will be raised and he will say, Iblis, the daddy demon, he will say that La talumuni walumu anfusakum, that do not blame me, blame yourselves. You know, ma kana li alaykum min sultan, I had no authority over you, no control over you. Innama da'awtukum fastajabtum li, I just said to you, hey, why don't you do this? And you did this. So shaitan himself in the Quran, by the words of God, is telling you that he has zero power over you. But yet for some reason people will believe that they can possess you, they can make you lose reasoning, they can make you commit acts of violence and aggression, they can do, which is a belief completely going against the Quran, clearly. And then they will use other kind of, people will use other kind of weak interpretations of some verses to prove this. Why do they do this? Why do they bend over backwards to do all of this? This is simply because they already, you see, the way human beings work is they already have a hell of a lot of beliefs, which they've just picked up. And all they're simply doing, alaykum assalam, all they're simply doing is just realigning Islam to fit those beliefs. That's what most people do. Most people throughout the world usually are inclined to superstitions. What they will do when they have organized religion is simply iron out some of those superstitions or recreate them under the banner of this new religion. That's all, like it happened in Christianity, like when, you know, when the Romans and they adopted Christianity as their state religion. All they simply did was got all these, you know, the god Venus and the god this and the god that and the sun god and all these kind of things, and just reinvented them with a Christian kind of veneer. Muslims have been hardly any different. I mean, they haven't really. I mean, Muslims were not this. I don't know why people think that Muslims would be any different. All they did is just recreated a lot of their kind of issue, the superstitions they had with an Islamic veneer, and they just gave it Islamic terms. So when they couldn't find the answer, they just said, "Oh, this must be this in Islam." But anyway, so these things do not exist. It is mental health. That's all it is. And the sooner people realize, the sooner they can seek help. Now, a lot of people in the Muslim community are not really so helpful when it comes to matters of mental health, and that's an issue which needs to be addressed, I suppose, within the community. Okay, so هل أخذ الإمام مالك من أبي حنيفة رحمه الله رحمهم الله عبود حجازي, alright, asking, did Imam Malik take from Imam Abu Hanifah? Right, did Imam Malik take from... Imam Malik respected Imam Abu Hanifah, but he didn't consider his methodology to be the methodology. He had respect for him, but that was that, and vice versa. They respected each other, but there wasn't this, you know, as some Hanafis would like to say, that he was the teacher of all of them. That is nonsense. I mean, Imam Abu Hanifah, in fact, to be fair, was faced a hard time in his time. So that is because in his time, a lot of the ulama kind of boycotted him. And later, after him, he became really significantly famous and popular and influential. But in his own time, he was influential, but not the way he became posthumously. So after his death, he became much more popular. Whereas people like Imam Malik were incredibly popular throughout their own lifetime. So people like Imam Malik, they had a massive following. So, you know, there was famous proverbial statements about them, you know, La yufti ahadun wa Malik fil Medina. Let nobody give a fatwa whilst Malik is in Medina. He was, in his time, approached by the caliph and asked to write a book that will just end all differences of opinion. He refused to do that. In his time, because he was in Medina as well, and everybody flocks to Medina. So, and you see, it's not just that. We have to understand, we have to understand that back then, what was your claim to orthodoxy? What was your claim to orthodoxy? Today, you see, human beings, we love to have everything organized. We love to have everything in kind of neat boxes. Like, this is compartmentalized. But life isn't necessarily like that, is it? I'm not sure. You're saying the image is blurred. I'm not sure. I can check here, like on my screen, as you can see, I can check on there. It looks fine. Look at that. Inception, people. Inception. Right, so you see, so now, I mean, I can try to, if you feel, I can try to maybe I don't know. I mean, it seems very clear to me. So I don't know why that is, people. I don't know what this thing is. Nope. Right, so, okay, right, thanks. I've tried to wipe the camera again. Usually before doing this, I do always have a wipe down of my iPad Pro screen, right? And right, so anyway, coming back to the point now, the thing is that, so how do we determine orthodoxy in Islam? How do we say something is orthodox? Now today it's easy because we've got, I say easy, it doesn't necessarily make it true, but it's easier. We've got this we've got books that say this is what makes you an Orthodox Muslim. You believe in A, B and C and you are an Orthodox Muslim. So people assume that this is how Islam has always been. We have these names called Ahl Sunnah. If you are part of Ahl Sunnah, you are on Orthodox Islam. This, you have to understand that these things were made up, you know, we're talking at least a couple hundred years after the Prophet. This is not how it was in the time of the Prophet or in the time after him. They never had Muslims like in the Sahaba time, in the Prophet's time, in the Sahaba's time, in their students' time, in their students' time, up until Imam Malik's time even, who is the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the Atba'u Tabi'een. All of their time, the Muslims did not have a creed that was clear. You have to understand this. So this comes as a shock. They didn't even have a name for Orthodox Islam. So today we have this name, Ahl Sunnah. This name did not exist. So Imam Malik, Imam Malik, who I've got his Mudawwana here somewhere, which is compiled from his fatwa, right? He's answering thousands, there's literally thousands, maybe 40,000 issues. They're telling people how they should pray, telling people how they should fast, how they should buy and sell, nikah, everything. Handle commerce, transactions, rent, loans, the penal code, all of these things. Yet, and he discusses sects. So he will say, that so-and-so, for example, he will highlight that these are a known deviant sect, for example. Yet Islam, he will not say to be a Muslim, this is what you must believe. He doesn't say that anyway. And that kind of begs the question, why not? It's one of the first things we do today, to say, oh, to be a Muslim, you must believe in A, B, and C, and D, and E, and F. And nowadays we do it all the way to Z, and then we begin with Alif, Ba, Ta. So we've got a crazy list of what you must believe to become a devout Orthodox Muslim. But in Imam Malik's time, these things did not exist. So who or what defined... Right, so who or what defined orthodoxy is the question. So in Imam Malik's time, what defined orthodoxy was a tradition. So you are the student of, for example, reliable people who were the students of the companions, but also your engagement with hadith in the early days. So this is the Sahaba Tabi'een time and the Atba' Tabi'een. those scholars who became preoccupied with hadith became seen as the representation of orthodoxy. Now it's important to understand this, that the early movement of what later became known as Ahl Sunnah, the mainstream body of Muslims, defined itself through the engagement with the preservation of hadith. So all of these scholars, Awza'i, Sufyan al-Thawri, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Layth ibn Sa'ad, Imam Malik, all of these people, they were a people that engaged themselves with hadith. Now this is why, although Imam Abu Hanifah was not, I'm not saying he was ignorant with hadith, he was also a scholar by today's standard, he would be amazing with hadith. But by that day's standard, he was not somebody who overwhelmingly committed himself to the study of hadith. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that's wrong, because some people committed themselves to the study of Quran, some people committed themselves to fiqh, some people committed themselves to language, some people committed themselves to hadith and fiqh, and some people to multiple. Now, because of that, Abu Hanifa faced a hard time. It was easier to cast him into the shadows and claim that he was a deviant than it was to do that with Imam Malik, for example. Even though both had views that became that were really problematic for other people, because both of them had an understanding of maslahah, that the deen must be based on welfare, and it must at all times reflect welfare, and you can move away from the text in light of welfare. And this was a very unique understanding that they transmitted from their teachers. So just to highlight, I thought that's worth sharing. And it is interesting to know that when the Prophet defined faith, he only defined it by these things: to believe in Allah, His messengers, His angels, His books, the understanding of destiny and a life after death. This was it. He never said, oh, if you believe in this or this or this or this. These were all the later part of the institutionalization of the deen. I understand much of it may have been done with good intention, but some of it may have been done to also control people. And it is important to understand as well, when I said what explains orthodoxy, orthodoxy in Islam was, one, self-defined, as I said, through this movement of hadith, engagement with hadith, and two, it was defined through reactionary measures. So what Muslims would do is they would say, oh, what he believes is not orthodoxy. So orthodoxy becomes defined by unorthodoxy. And that's important to understand. So how we know we're right is by calling out people who are wrong. This is good and bad. It's good in the sense that it gives a lot of flexibility, because you haven't exactly defined what you are. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. You're not rigid. It's bad in the sense that from very early on, the culture becomes one of calling people out, and also it gives an incredible amount of control to the clergy to be able to define what it means to be orthodox. So these are some very important things worth pondering over sometimes, if you're ever feeling reflective. Right, so where are we, people? Where are we? Some of the questions. Ah, damn. Screen. God damn, what is happening today to this? Right, right, let's go through some of these. How do we understand the ayat? Okay, here's a question by Sajid Riyasat, who out of hand. The Pir thing, has it got out of hand? Okay, Farid, the muscles need to get back into shape, man. The muscles need to get back into, I need to hit the gym. Right, so my take on Fadak. I don't know about, that's the whole Shia thing. We'll come to that. I've done a lot on the whole Shia thing anyway. I think the Shia totally probably hate my guts. Don't worry, people. It's all about love, not hate. It's all about love. Right, so now, so coming back to what are the challenges for British Muslims? Right, wa alaikum assalam. Abu Yusuf, we've got Abu Yusuf on the line, right, on here. I take it that's not the Abu Yusuf of Imam Abu Hanifah. Right, so the question is, well, the challenges for Muslims today. I do think the challenges for people today of faith, and especially Muslims in the West, especially, I think there's some, maybe I can speak more as a British person, but I would think this is shared across definitely the English-speaking world and Europe, the West in general. Now, the issue today is religion and what it will mean. I mean, these are the challenges for Islam. What religion will mean for people in this day and age. It is important that we reclaim Islam from this dangerous slope that it has found itself in, that people have placed it in. Islam has become hijacked over the, throughout history, but it's in more danger today because of this hijacking. And what do I think it's been hijacked by? I think it's been hijacked by dogmatists, people who believe in confessional approaches, like as in there is no question, there is no space to question anything about Islam or within Islam. And this approach is a very kind of totalitarian approach to Islam. It's been hijacked by extremism. It has also been hijacked by this kind of anti-Western kind of cry. The problem with all of these things are they're not that, I suppose these kind of things have been happening for a while. It's not so shocking. But it's when we look at the other, you see, when we look at non-Islam, non-religion, what are they doing? They are producing answers to our world. Answers on reality through physics. Answers on human life through science. Answers on the cosmos and galaxies. They are producing things which work. They are defining human ethics. We don't even have a system to go by. We don't even have a scientific model to people say, oh, I don't want to challenge, we don't have to accept everything these people come up with, the West comes up with. But you don't even have any other measure to question anything. So what that results is in people just becoming more stubborn and saying, deny everything that, the West brings you, or that science brings you, or that so-and-so and these things do for you. But that's, I don't know. There was this Facebook thing. I shared this post by Neil deGrasse Tyson, where he speaks about, he says, and I did say on the post, it's not that I necessarily agree with everything he's saying, but I think this is food for thought. And he speaks about how the Muslims who gave birth to this legacy of science are today the least participating in it. And he speaks about Nobel Prizes, and he does a contrast between Jewish people who, despite being such a small population worldwide, maybe 15 million or so, have obtained up to 25% of all global Nobel Prizes. And then he speaks about what about Muslims and where have Muslims gone, and he says that, look, I feel this was his understanding that Imam Ghazali ruined it for the Muslims. And that post people became so defensive on this post. Wow. I was just shocked how defensive Muslims became. I mean, okay, just chill out, people. But I believe in the overall message of what Neil deGrasse was saying. I think it's true that Muslims today, and for a few hundred years, we've kind of lost the understanding for the significance of science. And we gave it up. And today we are still doing this. Muslims are doing this. Nobody's forcing us to denounce science. But we are doing this out of almost a stubbornness. And then we're leaving it to the sole property of the atheists to claim. And I tell you, whoever claims science will win. There is no two ways about that, because science works. We are in the 21st century. You will only lose miserably, abysmally. It will be like the Catholic Church with Galileo. It's all over, but with the Muslims. So we need to embrace science. We need to embrace physics, biology, these kind of things. These are not the sole property of any religion. Okay, so it's important. Right now, anyway, the question was, what led to the demise of this curiosity amongst Muslims? Because we see when that, and I did highlight that historically, Muslims would call science al-hikmah, wisdom, because in the past, wisdom, what they called wisdom, was an umbrella term that incorporated several branches today, which would include philosophy, it would include chemistry, biology, physics, mathematics. All of this fell under al-hikmah. This was the Greek sciences that Muslims had discovered. So when they discovered them, they were like, wow, intoxicated by what they found. They could not believe what they found. And so they started to work on them, they started to adopt them, translate them. They had state support. So you have people like Harun al-Rashid and other people after him, other caliphs of the time, setting up a whole academy called Dar al-Hikmah, the home of wisdom or the home of science, in which he would set aside a bursary and a fund to have these books translated. Now, it does not mean that all Muslims were embracing these ideas. That's not true. All Muslims were not embracing these ideas. But there was a backdrop of support for these ideas. That's what's important. You see, that's important. That's too important. Because even today, in the Muslim world, we have many enlightened souls, many incredible scientists. Just as in the Western world, we have many dumb people. I mean, people who are very unreasonable, non-rational, anti-scientific, backwards. But the backdrop of both of these places is worlds apart. So the backdrop in the Muslim world today is one that does not support science, does not support stuff like space exploration or studying the cosmos or doing things like this. But here in the West, the backdrop supports these things. So if you are a person who is keen in understanding science, you will find a backdrop here to support it. Whereas if you were in Pakistan and you had an amazing idea on physics, you will not find a backdrop to support it. So in the past, because through even the Muslim elite, there was a backdrop to support it. it allowed these people, like, think about it, people like Al-Kindi, people like Ibn Sina, people like Al-Farabi, they had Muslim views that were really shocking. I mean, they would shock. Most Muslim scholars would never adhere to those views, ever. In fact, most Muslim scholars would call that kufr. You know, some of these people believe that, for example, that you could, like, they openly wrote about, you know, people like Farabi wrote about that prophets are obviously amazing people, but people can obtain, you know, like they had views like, let's say, understandings that you can obtain salvation without going through prophets, and that the universe was infinite, and that there was the concept of emanation, and there was a concept of, I mean, they came out with views which today people would deem kufr, and even in their time some people deemed kufr. But why did these people, why were their other contributions so successful? Why weren't they burnt at the stake? Why weren't their books burnt and them attacked and bloody gunned down with with spears and arrows? Do a drive-by arrow, right? So why did this not happen? Because there was a backdrop of support. So the backdrop enabled them to speak their mind. And yes, they came out with all kinds of views, but they also came out with a curious mind. So this is the difference. So the question is, where does this stop? This curiosity that Muslims had? Because Muslims could not get enough. They were in love. They were enamored, intoxicated. They were high as high as this. They were high as a kite on the stuff they'd found. So they'd found mathematics, geometry. They'd found medicine, like you know, you've got Galen, the sciences of Galen, which they started to translate and work on. Philosophy, how to discover biology, the writings of Aristotle, how life is produced, his studies of creatures, his studies zoology, and Muslims just could not get enough. So, but somewhere along the line, this astronomy, absolutely, Anisa, they found astronomy. I mean, Muslims were already into astronomy, but they found some which the Greeks had as well, right? Which I forgot his name now. I think Ptolemy, not Ptolemy, but there's Ptolemaeus or something. But another famous kind of pre-Islamic Greek. Yeah, he was an astronomer who'd listed the whole stars and the constellations and given them, codified them in brightness as well, luminosity, and done all of this. He had his own system. But yeah, so the Muslims started to add to all of this. But somewhere along the line, this stops. It's not that, you know, so some people commenting on this post said, oh, that's not true, because in this century, this Muslim scientists also discovered this. Listen, people, stop being so defensive, right? Nobody's saying that Muslims all of a sudden became retards. They still had brains, but they lost in general that curiosity. It doesn't mean there weren't sharp minds or curious minds. There were, but there was not that backdrop to support them. Now, why that happened? That's worth pondering over. I do personally agree. I do feel, I could be wrong, I feel a small part of that was played also by Imam Ghazali. I do accept that as a certain part of that he did play as well. I don't think he single-handedly managed to bring down the whole curiosity thing, but he did play a... no, not Ptolemy, there was another one. It's got a similar name. But the thing is that he did play a role, because Imam Ghazali, you see, he struggled he was an amazing legend and a genius of this ummah. And he struggled, like any genius does, with reality. Right, now, the more you start to contemplate, the more, honestly, it's... You think, what does this all mean? And I know to some people, and it's maybe a blessing, to some people it's like, they just say, oh, well, it means Allah made us and we just worship. And that's beautiful, mashallah. But for those really active minds, it's never enough to just say that. They can't help but ponder and reflect. And this is why, I know this is going to sound absurd, but people like Sheikh Shafi, ahlan wa sahlan, tasharrafna people, that's Sheikh Shafi from the UK, one of UK's finest right there. Follow him, add him. Any questions you have, shoot them out to him, inshallah. Right, the thing is, now, you see, this is why I know this may sound absurd, but it's Albert Camus, the kind of existentialist of the early 20th century. One of his statements about one of greatest, amongst the greatest conundrums of life is the question, the philosophical question, which he feels is the greatest philosophical conundrum, and that is suicide. And he feels that why do people not commit suicide? And that sounds, it may sound absurd at an initial, but you start to realize that, like people who ponder so much and think over things, it really gets like reality, they grapple and they struggle with the understanding of what is the point of it all. Wa alaykum as-salam, Shaykhana, Shaykh Shafi. So the thing is that now the brain has a survival mechanism, I agree, and this is why suicide is at a higher percentage in the developed world than it is in the struggling or the third world, for example, because there the survival mechanism is in action. But anyway, coming back to here, so Imam Ghazali, he struggled with a lot of these things, and he grappled with atheism of his time. And he grappled with the concept of does Allah exist or not, and what is the purpose of everything. But his solution in the end, like he comes up with a solution. His solution in the end is not one that I necessarily agree with. Because I think he was a man of great reason, of unfathomable reason. But in the end, he kind of gave up on reason and felt that reason could not save you. And his solution was to ditch reason. And I just feel that, in my understanding, was a bit of a cop-out. That you shouldn't, like you took it so far, you were this close. I just feel that I can understand this point. To this point, I'm with you that, okay, maybe reason sometimes cannot provide the answer to everything. But then to say ditch it altogether in its entirety is something that I wholly disagree with. So what he writes in his book Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, that the salvation from disaster, that after struggling and grappling with atheism and disbelief, what saved him in the end was to become a hermit. And I just felt, so he says, I found salvation in the path of the Sufiya, but you have to remember the Sufiya back then doesn't mean the Sufiya like today, like I'm part of this order who give me certain dhikr to do and stuff like this. Remember, as is a developed version of, evolved version of Sufism. Back then, Sufiya were those hermits. They were people who cut themselves off from the world. They lived in like as hermits. They were just seen as by like either insane or like they were seen as like weird, and they didn't care about the world. They just dressed in rags, and they did this kind of you know, like somebody saying the Indo-Pak world, what today we might call in the Indo-Pak world Malang, this kind of Malang lifestyle, where you just become a hermit. And that's what he became, and he found salvation in. So when he's saying the Sufiya, he doesn't mean, I know today Sufis will say he means join a Sufi order and become a Sufi. But that's just that's just a claim. But that's not what he meant by it. He meant become an absolute hermit and abandon the world altogether. So for over a decade of his life, he spends it in a desert. He doesn't care about anything to do with the world. He dresses in rags. He has patched clothing. He doesn't, I think for a certain portion, I don't know whether the entire decade, but for a considerable portion, he just lives in a tent. He just, and this is how he found his salvation. And he then claims reason needs to be ditched. That I feel he played therefore I feel he played a role. Why did he play a role in this? Was because, although not in his time, but he writes one of his final works, and his magnum opus is Ihya Ulumuddin. Now his Ihya Ulumuddin, which is hailed as an amazing book by people, and I know the Western Malikis of the time, like in Muslim Spain, people like Qadi Iyad and many other people, Mazari and people like that, who are great celebrated scholars of this ummah of Ahl Sunnah, they did not like it at all. And in fact, Qadi Iyad supported the fatwa of burning it. But I'm not saying maybe that's too harsh, but the reason why were they against this book, it wasn't just because it had weak and fabricated hadith in it, which it did. That wasn't the sole reason. The reason was that the image it presented of Islam was all as mainstream. Remember, he wasn't saying that Islam incorporates this. He was teaching that this is Islam. He was presenting Islam, like if you read Ihya Ulumuddin, it is basically the book of a hermit. Like, everything is about abandoning this world and having nothing to do with this world. It's all about just, it's very kind of gothic. Like, it's all very, it's like very depressive. If you read it, like, you know, Allah's going to punish us for this, you know, Allah, everybody's destroyed, learning knowledge is, like, if you read his book on knowledge, it begins by saying, you know, everybody is this, kulluhum halikun, except somebody who does this, and even they're destroyed if they don't do this, and even if you have sincerity, then you'll still be destroyed if you've not. It's a very kind of grim, like, and I understand that may be the way for some people, but he was presenting this as this is Islam. This is one of the reasons why the Muslims of the West in the time, like Qadi Iyad and these people, did not support this view of the world. They understood Islam to be an engaging religion, like one that engages with the world. Like the Prophet said, he said that, you know, that the person who lives in fitan, in tribulation, and engages society is better than the one who kind of abandons society and lives sincerely in, you know, following his sheep to graze in a pasture and living all safe and sound, because engagement is important. So now, so anyway, this was, now although Imam Ghazali in his lifetime was celebrated as an amazing figure, he was more celebrated because of his intellectual contributions, like his fiqh works, his usuli works and stuff like this, which later on he's more remembered for his Hamitic contribution. In his life, his Hamitic thing was actually looked down upon. It wasn't as celebrated as it later became. So in his own lifetime, like people like Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi and all these people who highly rate him, found that really odd about him, that why he would choose to live a life like this, right? So anyway, coming back to, so after him, probably about 200-300 years after him, when Sufism takes a massive rise, because in his time, Imam Ghazali's time, Sufism is not the dominant narrative in the Muslim world. But within the next 200-300 years, Sufism becomes, it preponderates, becomes over 50% of the dominant narrative. So, and then in the centuries after that, it will become the outright dominant narrative throughout the Muslim world. So, about 300 years ago, Sufism was the dominant. It was probably, I don't know, maybe 95% of the entire world was only upon Sufism. So you have to understand that although in Imam Ghazali's time, it may have been only something like 20% of the world or something like this, it would have been a small. So when Ibn Arabi or Qadi Iyad speak about the Sufiya, they speak about them as though they were a minority within the world. Now, with the rise of Sufism, this book, and this, it's not just the book, this view was further propagated, and it just kind of permeated throughout the Muslim world. So this view of I am drinking my drink, and right. So this view did permeate. So Muslims generally today, even there seems to be the dominant view across the Muslim world that Islam is ascetic. It's not about this world, and it's very Puritanist, and it ought to be Puritanist. So anyway, I hope that's of some. It's quite a lengthy discussion, but I think it's important to kind of have these under. This in no way is a diss to Imam Ghazali, by the way. So I don't want any people getting all kind of, when they hear this, getting all sensitive, because this is his contribution. It's his understanding. You know, he was an amazing individual, and it doesn't mean we have to worship every single thing the Imam did. He is one amongst many countless Imams. So we, he's amazing. We recognize his thing, but his views are not infallible. Okay, just to kind of, and I love Imam Ghazali, but I do recognize that this understanding of ascetic Islam, this Puritanist Islam, that he did play a significant role in forwarding that narrative of Islam, which today is the dominant narrative. So anyway, let's move on to some other questions, people. What the hell? Let's move on. Sheikh Fawzan said that it is not permissible to criticize Muslim rulers. What if a Muslim ruler is a human rights abuser? Is it still not permissible? Hell yeah, you can criticize Muslim rulers. You can criticize whoever the hell you want. Right, that's what... you see, there's no... Criticizing people is a fundamental human right that you ought to have. Obviously, one is just useless trolling. That's, petty, but to criticize, as in critically, as in constructive criticism, is important. Muslim rulers. Okay, here's another deep topic. I'll try to cut through it as much as I can, as quickly as I can. By the way, I'm so glad what happened with Nawaz Sharif. I really hope Imran Khan gets, becomes Prime Minister of Pakistan, seriously. Pakistan, man, it's just it's a mess. It's a mess. But what's shocking about Pakistan, just as a 60-second interlude, is that in the 60s, it was one of the most leading economies in Asia. And so if you check the 60s, and you can Google this, that Pakistan was one of the first to set up their airlines. They actually assisted Singapore with their airlines. They assisted, I think, South Korea with their airlines, setting them up. They were deemed the leading. PIA in the 60s was like, and 60s, 70s was hailed as a celebratory kind of airline. And this is after independence, and yet today it's so backwards. Really, I mean, Google this stuff. I'm not just making this stuff up. This is factual. So what happened is not. So this is why it annoys me when people keep saying, "Oh yeah, but the Muslim world can't get better because the West are controlling it." But that's not. You see, what about in the 60s, goddammit? Colonialism. Yeah, but what about in the 60s? Muslim countries like Pakistan were hailing, I mean, they were ahead. They were absolutely dominating the entire continent. Yet today, that they are so amongst the least developed. Or not developed, but they're corrupt. So I know they're nuclear strong, but they're corrupt. So, you know, nobody's forcing you to be corrupt. But anyway, now let's get back to this question. People asking about leaders. Sheikh Fawzan. First of all, I just want to say, people, as I've said before, people like Sheikh Fawzan and greater than him, like people like Sheikh Jibreen. Oh, you gotta love their names though. Their names are slick. I give them that. Come on. Be honest, people. Credit where credit is due. Their names are cool. I love their names. Jabreen, Uthaymeen, Fawzan. You know? Bimbas. Honestly, I love their names. They have got, I have to say, the Salafi, Saudi Salafi, Wahhabi kind of scholars have cool names, man. I mean, it's better than like Allah Bakhsh, you know, Allah Dita. Mola Bakhsh. You know, come on, it's better than, let's be honest, people. It's like better than like Jahangir. You know, like they've got, which I'm sure is a nice name if you've got those names, but I'm just saying, these names are cool. You gotta give them that. I respect, credit where credit is due. But okay, beyond their names, right, these ulama, you seriously, you know, in the West, you can't really be looking to those ulama to be providing you insight for your daily lives. Layth is a cool name, man. I gotta say. I gotta say, people, that's just too cool, man, Layth. But anyway, so, but these Salafi Wahhabi ulama, and I like I said, look, I don't call them Wahhabi to be rude to them. I'm just calling them by what they are. They are the Wahhabi Salafis. Just as they would call me modernist, I'm just calling them Wahhabi Salafi because that's what they are. Right now, you cannot really take them as beacons in the West. Maybe if you lived in Saudi Arabia, they're awesome. You know, if you lived in a desert, or you rode camels and milked camels and, you know, and did stuff like that, then they're awesome for you. That kind of way of life, they know it. They can, you know, they're on point. If you lived in Arabia in a desert or something like this, taking fatwa from the UK would be absurd for you because you are not from the UK, right? You wouldn't. So for us to take fatwa from them on a one-off issue, okay, but seriously, for your daily lives, these are not your people. I was reading just yesterday, actually, a fatwa. A fatwa by Sheikh Jibreen. God, right? About playing chess or playing cards. Haram! Haram! It's haram! This is like haram! Anybody who plays chess is haram. This is nothing but lahu. This is lahu al-hadith. This is this. You are wasting your time. You are wasting your life. You are wasting your this. You know, you should be worshipping Allah. Allah. I mean, that in itself, seriously, this is online, by the way. You can Google their fatwa. Even Uthaymeen, who I consider to be a bit from, like, if this is the spectrum of Wahhabi Salafis, I consider him to be central, not hardline right, or I consider him to be kind of like, from their perspective, level-headed. Even he was saying, playing cards, playing chess is haram. No. And if you're gambling, then it's more haram. You know, you should be worshipping Allah. by Allah, I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance. Right, seriously people, this alone goes to show the great disconnect they have with the real world. Look, in the real world, people don't live like that. You know, like, you need to realize that people are not hermits. You know, people do not... See what I was talking about, that hermetic lifestyle. Like, they don't, oh, you should be worshipping Allah. You know, the Prophet, when he was asked, he never said that. You know, the person said to the Prophet, Hanzala said, you know, oh, when we're with our family, we're chilling, we're laughing, we're playing, we're doing this, we're having all kinds of fun, we're up to all kinds of stuff, and we forget all about you, Ya Rasulullah, Messenger of Allah. And he said, chill. He said, Ya Hanzala, sa'atan wa sa'a. A moment for this, a moment for that. Relax. You are in this world. Allah says, وَلَا تَنْسَى نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. Do not forget your portion of this world. You know, the Bedouin said to the Prophet, oh, you know, is this what I have to pray? Wallahi lan azida alayha. You know, I will never increase upon these 5 prayers. And the Prophet said, you know, he said that, wa abihi, that I swear, and there's a whole discussion on why did he swear by his father, but in some, you know, whatever, or warabbil Kaaba, in some narrations, by the Lord of the Kaaba, that laqad aflaha in sadaq. As long as he did that, he prayed his 5 prayers, he will attain salvation. Look, relax people, the real world doesn't live like that. So this, no, you cannot play games, you cannot play this, you should be worshipping Allah. This, it's too ideal. It doesn't, human beings don't, you know, if Allah just wanted you to worship, He had angels. You know, this is not what Allah said. He's created us to have a connection with Him. But anyway, so let's get back to this question now. So that answers this. It is permissible, listen, it is permissible to play all of these kind of games. Any game is permissible. I know in the hadith there is this hadith about nard, which I think people today translate as backgammon. I'm not sure if the backgammon that we have today is the same as nard or nard shir mentioned in the hadith, or it's different. But my understanding that the only reason that was made haram was because of the context of what was going on around it in the time of the Prophet. So people were gambling, and people were they were leading to violence. It was leading to aggression and things like this. So the Prophet stopped it. That was it, and mainly because they were gambling, which is haram anyway. So the Prophet just closed that path. Chess and all these computer games or whatever it is are not haram per se. Okay, maybe some things in them may be wrong. Gambling is haram. If you are gambling, then that is haram. Right, so just to answer that. The question on leadership, somebody was asking, right, somebody wrote about my neck, having pulled my neck, that the evil eye. Well, it's a good thing I don't believe in the evil eye, right? But which I don't, and the evil eye does not exist, people. And I've done a video on that. You can we play itti danda? I don't know what itti danda is, my friend. Magar dande se kuch to samajh mein aa raha hai. I don't know. Yaar, ye int ke saath kya karte hain aap? I don't know about that, but so yeah, so. I don't actually believe in the evil eye. Things like the evil eye, once again, are an extension of superstition, which have been Islamized. The evil eye, where it has been mentioned in certain hadith which are sahih, is simply synonymous with the term envy. That's all it is. Evil eye just means envy. Somebody asked here, can we explain how was Surah Falaq and Naas revealed then? Surah Falaq and Naas were revealed in Mecca. So way before any kind of claims of demonic possession or magic or anything. Right, so just to kind of clarify that. Yes, so all those games are fine, FIFA, etc., things like this, just to answer that. Right now, so wherever you do hear things about evil eye and stuff like this, it's talking about in terms of outcome. Outcome is haram, because envy in itself is haram. Why is envy haram? Why is jealousy haram? Oh, I'm jealous. I'm envious. It's not because you've just got an emotion and it's going to cause blood pressure, high blood pressure. It's because you may act out on it, and how you act out may cause harm. So when you read Surah Falaq, Allah says, "Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq min sharri ma khalaq." I seek refuge in the evil of what has been created. Wa min sharri ghasiqin idha waqab. And from the evil of the nightfall as it falls. I ask you, what is so evil about nightfall? Nightfall ain't evil. Night ain't evil. It's not, just because it's night, it isn't goddamn evil. But it's what takes place as a consequence of night. So when it's dark, vampires rise, people. My lifestyle, vampire lifestyle, man. With darkness we rise. So the thing is, but with night, that's when burglaries, robberies, raids in the past. In the Arabian time, there was raids like Vikings. They would raid people, kill people. And it was attacks and vulnerabilities which you're seeking refuge from. So when you say min sharri ghasiqin idha waqab, you're not actually seeking refuge from the nightfall, but what happens as a consequence. Wa min sharri hasidin idha hasad, and from the envy of the envier when he has envy. Why? It's just an emotion. But when he may act out. So in the same light, envy just is what the word evil eye was used as when somebody's going, evil eye, right? It doesn't mean, oh my God, he stared at him and now he caused his molecular kind of cellular production to mal-reproduce and now he has cancer. It does not mean that, people, okay? All it means is how you may act out as a consequence. Right, so now let's get back to some questions. Alaikum assalam, people. Alexandra. What a slick name. Alexandra. All right. Right, so people, right now, what was I saying? Yeah, about leadership. This, I think, was one of the core problems that Muslims struggled with after the Prophet ﷺ had passed away. And that was this concept of leadership. And I think really this is what is truthfully behind the Sunni-Shia split. I think what was truthfully behind it, as a seed, if you like, a seed that then grows, is really the concept of that there ought to be leadership after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now that much they all agree on. There ought to be some kind of leadership. Like somebody to guide, somebody to help, somebody to give directions. But the problem was that it was human, all too human. This, in my understanding, was what was truly behind the Sunni-Shia split. That how was this leadership human, all too human? That how was it? And I think in the beginning there was an incredible effort in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, which was short, only 2.5 years. And then in the time of Umar, there was an incredible effort to have this upstanding, which there was, in my understanding, an upstanding, amazing leadership. which is just based on religiosity. But then you start to see the human, the natural side of it come in with Uthman radiallahu anh. This thing of, right, him placing his relatives in control of him, you know, just being human. Nothing wrong in being human. And he was a wealthy person as well. And he was always wealthy. He was wealthy in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was wealthy then as well. So you can see this struggle, people rising against, no, you know, that the true leader ought to just be, shouldn't leadership be somehow kind of like semi or demi-divine almost? And this is, in my understanding, what then, as it kind of bears fruit, leads to the kind of divergence between Sunni-Shia Islam. Because Sunnis, on one hand, still, a lot of them in later times wanted this as well. So they wrote in their books, some of them, oh, there should be an ideal leader and stuff like that. Never happened. Never, ever happened. Ever. And they all accepted it. But they still wanted, they had this kind of utopian vision. Some of them, when they wrote books, which today is then exploited by people like Hizb ut-Tahrir and other neo-Khawarij extremist groups. So that there ought to be this kind of utopian. But the Shia, the only way they could find a solution was that, okay, then the Imam ought to be infallible. And he can only be, and then they have their method of arriving at that. But I think that's an interesting kind of food for thought there. I was listening to the summary of a book, actually. It was really interesting by the author in her interview. She's an academic, and it was called After the Prophet. And it's, I don't think she's Muslim, but it's incredible, her book was. Talks about this, the Sunni-Shia divide, and she kind of raises some of these questions and other questions as well. Right, so let's move on, people. What are some questions? The Khawarij, exactly. You see, because the Khawarij were looking for this ideal leadership. And you have to remember, the Khawarij were originally from the political group, the Shia of Ali. And then, I'm not saying they are the today's Shia, but yeah. Right, haircuts, people. All haircuts are fine. Relax. This is definitely not haram, and my haircut is overdue, people. I need my blend, which I'll probably be going in for, right? So I need that done, and haircuts are not haram. Once again, do not take from, I mean, you can take. It's your life. Do whatever the hell you want, but I would not advise you to take from like the Saudi or any Puritanist perspective of Islam. When the hadith that said about qaza, about patches, was speaking about mutilation, mutilating people and resembling monks, because monks behaved like that. Monks at the time would like shave off one entire patch of their head here, or they would do things like this, or they might shave off the whole head and leave a single braid. This was seen in the past not as fashion, but as a religious statement. Therefore, the Prophet, he told people not to do it. It was not because the Prophet was guiding on fashion. Okay, so let's get that out of our minds. 72 virgins for men in paradise. Amen, people. Amen. I don't know where that concept has come from, right? 72 virgins in paradise. There's no such hadith as 72 virgins in paradise for men who have committed, men who are martyrs or things like this. I don't know how it's become so popular. And it's become more popular in recent times. There's no such, I mean, there is a concept in the Quran. It does speak about men having men having women in paradise, but it's not linked to this number 72. It's not linked to martyrdom. It's not linked to things like that. It just does say that. But I mean, like Umar al-Falaq is saying, we're not fussy. 70 will do. But I tell you what's interesting is you see some of these video clips. I saw a clip of some Saudi scholar. You know, this Puritanism, Hermeticism being imposed, but at the same time going on about how we will have rampant sex in heaven, and it'll be amazing, and we'll go on for so long, and this will happen, and it'll last for years. Right, and all of this stuff. That's heaven Viagra, bro. Heavenly, right? The thing is, it will go on for like years and years and years. I think 40 years will be like one episode. Now, the thing is, all right, Abdullah, that's my right hand and the camera is reversed, you genius with the mental capacity of a 6-year-old. Right, so the thing is, now, you see, this shows the hypocrisy of these people. It's imposing a hypocrisy on Islam. Because how can you on one hand preach all this, women must be like this and covered and do this and do that, and we must be all about Allah, 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 and then just at the same time be going on and just, you know, just depicting, illustrating heavenly orgies that are going on and doing all of this. That is a contradiction. Like, either you got to chill one of these down. Either just don't act so Hamitic and Puritanist in this world, just act normal, or just chill down with your kind of like heavenly depictions. That's what I'm saying. So it shows the kind of hypocrisy that some Muslims are displaying, and we need to take ourselves to account. You know, like Sayyidina Umar would say, "Hasibu anfusakum qabla an tuhasabu." That take yourselves, you Muslims, take yourselves to account. Like when people are saying women must be all covered and this and her one eye of the Dajjal. Right, the one eye of the female Dajjal, right? When they're saying that she can only have one eye, and I think she can have like two. She can't even have like a fingernail exposed, or she's got to have, you know, all this kind of stuff they're going on about. She can't speak. Her voice is an aura, and this and this and this. Look, I get it. All men, generally speaking, I know today, will be attracted to all aspects of women. I get that. That is natural. That is human. Now, to hypersexualize and then Islamize that sexualization by saying cover, 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 block, do this, do that, and then at the same time teach views like, oh, but slaves, female slaves should be, they can't cover their hair, they must be, they can show their breasts, they don't even need to cover in salah, they only need to cover between the navel and the knee. They don't, yeah, like this is a hypocrisy. So what I'm trying to say is you need to be careful how you are presenting Islam, because this is ridiculous. You can't present on one hand, be super uber hermetically pious, you know, like puritanistically pious, and then on the other hand be some kind of like just open, oh, because they were slave girls, you know, it's totally okay to be just gung-ho kind of live a pure, you know, you can't do that. Okay, it doesn't, and it reflects badly on Islam. That's what I'm trying to say. And don't think people don't pick up on this. They do. People pick up on this nonsense. Just because you may not hear it, they pick up on it. So that's some of the things I would like to highlight, that we need to be careful. Look, I think, this is my understanding, I think that, look, Allah entices human beings, creatures, with what is dear to them instinctively, and also what was dear to the people who the Quran was revealed to, because they were the primary focus. Through them, Islam would reach the other people. So some things in the Quran about Jannah were really just focused on Arabia at the time. And some things were focused on generally for mankind, that humans would generally share certain similarities. And the main thing is Jannah is nothing like any of these things. The afterlife, as Ibn Abbas said, it only shares similar names. There are no similarities in reality. It's because you cannot comprehend an afterlife. And that's what the Prophet said. He said, مَا لَا عَيْنٌ رَأَتْ, what no eye has seen, وَلَا أُذْنٌ سَمِعَتْ, وَلَا خَطَرَ بِبَالِ بَشَرٍ قَطْ, and not a single human soul has ever conceived, not even conceptualized. So that is important. So human beings, like men generally, are very polygamous, as most people all know, as all men know, as all those men who generally own up to, and all the rest who just simply lie about. Right, so, and that's part of our human evolutionary kind of instinct, right? So men like that are just unfortunately just creatures, right? So it doesn't matter what any man is telling you, he's only lying. My thing is, I just don't lie about it, that's all, right? So men are always going to be attracted, they are going to be always like distracted. And so that was brought up to entice people about an afterlife. Then there were certain things in the Quran like shade, dhillan, dhalila, and rivers of honey and rivers of milk. These kind of things were more specific to the recipients of the Quran in Arabia. So people today are probably, we find no joy. If you told me, or if you told many people, hey, here's a river of honey, would you want a river of milk, would you want to jump in it? Be like, no. So, exactly, because with that, people have changed. So some things we have changed in, and that's fine. People here, like if you live in the UK where the weather is unreliable and it's almost always raining or shady or cloudy, the shade is nothing important. Whereas for Arabia, shade was everything. So you have to understand that some things are for them and some things are for all humanity. Okay, right, but this is only in words. The main thing was, it was just to kind of entice people in a positive way for greater things to come which are yet to you incomprehensible. Islamic view on artificial intelligence. I think artificial intelligence is awesome. It's scary at the same time. I think we are in an amazing time, honestly. We are in an amazing era. I mean, just wow. Seriously, we are in a time where, subhanallah, I've subscribed to, it's part of my Amazon Prime. Boy, is Amazon Prime a lifesaver. But anyway, part of that, I've subscribed to this, you get on there, this course channel, and it does courses on all kinds, amazing stuff. So subscribe to that, and sometimes when I'm bored and not watching TV series, I start sometimes watching some different courses, right? So I was watching this course on history, and it was amazing when it speaks about, and it's something that we don't really think about, we take for granted, that all human history, right, all human history that we have, all of human history, is really biased through the lens of an urban lens. So it's it's basically all history as seen by people who lived in cities, who during all of human history, not today, let's go leave pre-industrialization, human cities always had the minority of humanity in them. So most of humanity lived in a rural landscape. So for every one person in a city, maybe 8 to 10 different people were living in a rural landscape somewhere on farms. But yet all of history is documented through cities and towns, because that's where everything that was happening was happening. For most of humanity, all they simply did for documented humanity was that they were just farmers. And they just worked on a field, made enough food to survive on. Every so often, a certain amount of their food was just taken either by the state or by anybody just, that came to usurp it, take it by force. And the infancy death rates were massively high, mortality. So you would see maybe for every 5 children that were born, only 1 survived. You were very lucky to make it into your teens, and if you did, you were very lucky to make it into, like, let's say Middle Ages. You would just die. Now, there was very little medical care, and there was very little interest in life beyond just that. You had very little aspirations, and most people never ever set foot in a city or a town during their entire lifetimes. Okay, so now all of this, if you take a look at that, the vast majority of all of humanity just lived and died without any kind of, without many things which today, many mental things which today we would take for utter, just unquestionably take for granted. These things like, hey, what would you like to be when you grow up? What would you like to do? What are your hobbies? Who would you like to get married to? What religion would you like to believe in? Do you think this view is actually right? What are your favorite foods? What are just to understand that pre-industrialization, most of the world, so since 150 years ago maybe, most of the world always lived like that. That is, we can't even fathom that. It's just wow. Honestly, just wow. People, anyway, let's take a look at some questions, shall we? What are some questions? What are some questions, people? But this artificial intelligence, I think, is amazing. I'm all for science, by the way, so I am worried that we might create cyborgs that might take over every... Right, but what the hell? Well, here's to the great unknown. Free electricity would be awesome. Why not? Right, so come on, people. Let's have some questions. I think I've missed all the other questions. Right, there was a question I had today about tattoos, by the way. I've answered this before in much depth, but right, have the robots lead Salah? Wow, that would be an interesting question. Peer culture. Okay, I'll come back to that. I've answered this on tattoos previously. Any of my previous questions, you can just, by the way, search YouTube for them, put my name, Mufti Abu Layth, put the question, and it will bring up, hopefully, the Monday Nights with Mufti, and it will have an itemized, timed index on there saying that this question at this time. Tattoos, I have highlighted before that, look, although yes, there are those hadiths where the Prophet ﷺ cursed people, But certain ulama from the school of Medina, from the Maliki madhab, did say that they understood them not to be haram. Okay, and this is the way that Imam Qarafi kind of bears that way, and some other people as well. People like Ibn Zayyat, and there's other Malikis, and this is why you see a lot of the kind of Berber tribe women in the Maghrib. They would, a lot of them would have these little tattoos and stuff like this. But there is, I have explained in much detail, look, you have to understand that the whole backdrop to tattoos. And that is that tattoos originally, yep, the Amazigh, yep, you're right, absolutely, Robin. Historically, tattoos were not a fashion statement. So, in the time of the Prophet, tattoos were things to brand people or cattle. And you either, the branding took place either with slaves, to say he or she is my property, or with animals to say that is my property. So it was done as a kind of a brand. It wasn't done as a fashion statement. So it's very important to understand the context in which the Prophet spoke when he said these things were haram. Now, and it stayed like that throughout a huge part of human history. This is why all tattoos were done as tribal, kind of like as an act of tribal solidarity. That we are this tribe, we will have certain tattoos. Marks, but those tattoos were not fashion tattoos. So somebody having, I don't know, a picture of a small rose or things like this, these kind of things were not generally done. I'm not saying nobody may have done them, but this was not how the world did things with tattoos. Some of the Berber women that did have tattoos, or in Pakistan, you see even today the elderly women, and maybe from, like, I would feel like my grandmother's era, they used to have small kind of tattoos, sometimes on their chin and things like this, and sometimes on their hands, a few marks and things like this. These things were done just as kind of play, and to kind of, they might have been seen as maybe an act of beauty, but they weren't really beautiful, the tattoos. Not saying that about my grandma. I'm sure she was beautiful in her time, but the thing is, so alright, toros locos. Alright, los sureños. Right, the thing is, now that was just somebody writing there, messaging about the Mexican or the Latino gangs. I gotta say, you know, I find the culture from a distance, from a safe distance, so like, wow, like intriguing, because I'm learning Spanish and I'm going through a lot of these kind of Latino things. So it helps with my Spanish, and it's like a different world. But I gotta say, from a distance, it seems so cool. The Southsiders, they got all the La M, they got all this stuff going, man. But crazy brutality, man, crazy. I'm not trying to glorify it at all. I totally disagree and condemn violence, people, absolutely. Absolutely, utterly condemn it. Right, so coming back to this, so this is why the people like Imam Qarafi, he argues this concept, and the Malikiya had said that things in that hadith were speaking about a woman in her iddah, the widower, the widow who's going through, the widow who's going through a state of mourning, that she refrains from threading her eyebrows and doing things like this, plucking hair and tattoos and stuff like that. Okay, so I hope that's of some help. So it is permissible in my understanding. Male piercings, right? So look, piercings are permissible. There's nothing, it's not haram, not for men or women. And you can have, men can have generally piercings. Although there hasn't been a huge culture, but there has been somewhat of a, right, okay, sorry, just before I go into this, about what Umar said about gang tattoos, those things would be haram. These kind of distorting, anything to mutilate yourself would be haram. So, you know, you get these kind of gangs do all this kind of horrid gang tattoos all over their face and stuff. So to make yourself look horrible or mutilated is haram, is forbidden in Islam. But just like something as to enhance, like if you thought it was just fashion or it made you look good, that would not necessarily, as Qarafi argues, why would that be haram? And then he said, people say you're changing the creation of Allah, and he argues then what is different about circumcision and things like cutting nails and trimming certain hair, is that not changing the creation of Allah? And people could argue that tattoos are permanent. His response would be circumcision is permanent, and if God wanted you circumcised, he could have made you born circumcised. But so that was his argument in his book. But I'm just saying, but today's tattoos can be removed as well. But that does not include, I am not including these kind of horrid, anything to kind of make you shocking and to kind of to terrorize, to cause terror is forbidden. Okay, so that's just to make that clear. Somebody's asked, why doesn't my hair look like the Rasul hair? Right, well, that's because the Prophet never came to set a hairstyle. The Prophet came to connect you with Allah. He did not come, he came for all time and all places. He didn't come to set fashion. Okay, anybody who's telling you that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to instate fashion, in my understanding, is being disrespectful to the Prophet. Okay, he did not come to set fashion trends. He came, you've seriously underestimated the value of this message. It was not a fashion statement. It was about the salvation of humanity. Get a grip of yourself, God damn it. So piercings, once again, it's the same thing. Anything to cause terror or horrifying, you know, people have all these kind of like a piercing in here to here, and that kind of stuff I do believe would be haram because of the terror aspect and the mutilating aspect to it. But fashion statements like an earring or things like this are not haram, definitely not haram for women, and neither do I believe them to be haram for men. Body piercing, likewise, is permissible as well. So these things are not haram. Okay, just to clarify that. Right, so you have to remember as a principle, people, by default, all things are always permissible. This is the understanding that we take from Imam Malik. This was transmitted through al-Layth and through Ibn Khwayz al-Mandad and other Malikiyah, that by default, all things are permissible in Islam. Now, right, okay, I'll come to that video of Uthaymeen in a moment. Right, now, so if anything is to overturn that, it has to be conclusive. And hadith on their own can be conclusive in their wording, but they have to fit in with the greater understanding of Islam, because they could have a context as well. If they have a context, then you need to analyze it. We wholeheartedly do embrace hadith, but we make a distinction between hadith and sunnah. As Imam Malik said, not every hadith is a sunnah. So, as Imam Malik responded to Abu Yusuf when he told him that the adhan of Medina is different, he said that maybe the Prophet taught something one day somewhere. We don't really know and we don't care. He said that, but this is what we inherited from our teachers who inherited from the Prophet directly in Medina. So the understanding of Medina trumps all people. It trumps all, God damn it. Right, the school of Medina. All right. Right, so right, could global warming be a sign of Qiyamah? I don't know. Look, I think we should take these things seriously, global warming, although I do also think it is a part of the natural cycle of Earth, that it does this and this. But I do think we should take things seriously, carbon emissions, the greenhouse effect. I disagree with what Trump strongly condemn his idiotic, stupid, pathetic, dumb moves of breaking away from the environmental treaties and things like this. That's a goddamn joke in this day and age. But anyway, right, in case you didn't see my question, regarding Ibrahim did to the idols. I've answered this last week. If you watch my about breaking the idols, I answered that in depth. So if you listen, check out my last week's talk. Okay, right. I've discussed this about why do Muslims lag behind in science earlier on today. So catch up, inshallah, after this. Peer culture, this thing about peers, guides. Okay, why do? Oh, God damn, people, man. You know, the steam room in my local gym is bust. Right. Honestly, I could do with that today. You know, I filled up. Filled up. I was telling you, I had one of those bath relaxants, everything in there, and chilled out, muscle soak. And then I woke up and I'd almost done my back in as well. I'm like, what the hell? I tell you, people. You know when you're, you know, some of that time when you're in a bath, just chilling on your own, right? You're just chilling, got your ice drink. Yeah, I don't know if this happens to everybody, but I sink into this deep contemplative state of mind. It's bloody freaky, man. Honestly, God damn, everything just, it gets so real, man. And it's weirdly, it's not depressive. Must be scaring people now, but it's just, oh my God, man, it's just so overwhelmingly philosophical. I can't, and it's more on a downer than an up. So God, so people who say I don't understand what people going through depression are going through, I do. So this is why you have to snap out of it when you come out of there. Right, old age, this is it, man. My old age, God damn it. Senility. Right. But on the bright side, you forget all about it every 10 seconds. Right, so let's get back to this. Right. Now, peer culture. This thing about peer thing is you see, this kind of thing, I don't really agree with all of this kind of stuff at all. This culture of all these beads, and you have all this saint kind of semi-worship, and these kind of orders, and I don't. You see, to me, the deen must always be built on firm reason. Somebody's objecting to me saying, "God damn it!" Well, no, I won't stop saying it. God damn it! God damn it! I've answered this before. You can check my previous questions. I've answered it in detail actually about swearing, and not that I consider, us Brits don't consider damn a swear. Okay, for your information, for la information. Okay, so the thing is, we don't consider it swearing. Anyway, so this peer culture is once again, in my understanding, superstition. A lot of superstition, which has then been kind of given some order. This emphatic, all this kind of, I don't know, this reverence, like hyperbolic reverence of kissing everything and worshipping, semi-worship. And see, the problem with it is you see, it's not that I have a problem with it per se. It's not that I have a problem with it per se. Like somebody saying, yeah, Al-Gawth and believing in Abdul Qadir al-Jilani is floating around and he's going to help us and he's going to do all these things. You see, people, you can believe whatever the hell you want. You're, an individual, you got your own life, you got your own mind. But the problem is these things are the antithesis to reason, to a mindset or a backdrop of reason. If you have a mindset like this, you cannot have a mindset that is based on reason. These are two opposing kind of worldviews. Islam was always a religion, was meant to be a religion based on reason. Today, but you see, like I said before, human beings are just so inclined to superstition, they just reinvent it through Islam. So this, you see, in the past, people like we would struggle. I think human beings do struggle with with monotheism, with Tawheed, with true Tawheed. Because true Tawheed, I think, does lead to the understanding that why would God want anything to do with us? And I think, and I've answered this in depth before, and because of that, just like how Christians did it, they then, what they started to do was create this kind of, they started to pontify and create this papacy, these kind of popes and saints and these figures who were patron saints and protectors and who they would then worship through. And it was the same thing but just rebranded as now Christianity. Muslims didn't do much different. Like they, in very similar ways, they behaved similarly over the not in the beginning, but hundreds of years later, this came in as Islam started to spread through certain lands where that was rife. Like, so in the Indo-Pak world, where Hinduism and idolatry was rife, all Muslims kind of did was just revamped the whole thing and just gave it an Islamic veneer. So now it's okay, we don't worship Ganesha. He's not the you know, the god of might and, you know, the elephant head guy, but we'll just worship a saint who is known for always dealing with well, okay, we won't call it worship now. We'll just call upon him for help and give offerings. Like, instead of going to the elephant, instead of going to, you know, let's say Lord Ganesh and giving these kind of offerings and saying, will you help me? Now I'll just go to a dead saint, let's say from hundreds of years, and I'll do an offering in his name and ask him to help me. From a distance, they're not actually very different at all. I mean, okay, this saint doesn't have an elephant's head, or he doesn't have, he's not a monkey, or he's not a, you know, but not all of their gods were like that as well. I mean, the old Hindu gods, you know, Vishnu, Ram, Krishna, all these people, they weren't necessarily all animals either. So the thing is that the concepts kind of stay the same because people struggle with pure Tawheed. This is why, to me, one of the most helpful verses in the Quran is that where Allah says, "Laysa kamithlihi shay," that nothing that you can ever comprehend is like unto Allah. Because you will, through your reason, arrive at this understanding that why would God want, you know, He's so distant. Why me? Why would He take care of me? And that is where this verse comes in as salvation. That's because everything you can comprehend still falls short of Allah. And I want to clarify here that I'm not saying that people who do this are mushriks. I don't call them mushriks. I know the Salafi and people like that call them mushriks. I don't believe they're mushriks at all. I believe they are Muslims, but I believe this is just the nature of humanity and the nature of religion. Religion will always kind of, people will just appropriate it to whatever they had already. And they will give it the face that they had. And it's important to understand as well that, look, in the West, in the English-speaking West, not mainland Europe, the English-speaking West, so mainly in the UK, and also, Mazhar Hussain, give a shout out to my bro Shami. All right, Shami, is that you doing it? Right, so the thing is, now, look, in the English-speaking West, which is mainly the UK and America, Canada generally, right, but more so the UK, we have to understand that our overwhelming understanding of Islam, overwhelming understanding of Islam, maybe in the UK, maybe 95%. Look how large that is. Of our understanding of Islam only comes from two parts of the world. Look how vast the Muslim world is, from the Maghrib in the west, right through to Indonesia, you know, or we're however far, as far down as, you know, you want to take it, as Mali and Sudan and other places in Africa, right through to all of the Muslim world, billion, over 1 billion, 2 billion, whatever it is between their people on the world. Our 95% of our impression and understanding of Islam comes to us through only mainly 2 countries here. And that is Pakistan. And if you wanted to extend Pakistan, you could say the Indo-Pak world. So maybe a bit of India, Bangladesh, but Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. That is it. That is it, people. In America, I believe, and once again, an overwhelming amount, maybe not as strong as the UK, maybe not 95%, but I would believe still maybe about 70% of the understanding that of Islam in America and Canada still comes through these 2 countries. But in America, because they've got a bit more of a diaspora of different, like let's say Egyptians and other people, so you might get some Arab understanding. Here, now look at these 2 countries, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. They are notorious on human rights. They are countries which are very totalitarian, which are very anti-women rights anyway. They are very patriarchal. This is nothing to do with religion, and I'm not just dissing the countries, I'm just being honest. They are control-freak countries that don't like things like freedoms and generally speaking. So naturally your view of Islam is going to be massively tainted. We do not get views here from Morocco. Morocco doesn't influence us in the UK. Let's face it, who the hell gets influenced by Morocco here? Who the hell gets influenced by Egypt here? Did you know there's fatwa? There's been fatwas every year coming out from Moroccan ulama that we would consider absurd. People here, they've never even, like, so for example, was it last year the sheikh in Morocco, let's say, gave a fatwa that taking pills during your fast does not break your fast if you took, because as long as you don't take them with water. I'm just saying, I'm not saying I agree with that, but I'm just saying we would never have heard something like this. Let's say they've got views in Morocco, women go to the masjid. In Morocco, they've had views before to do with inheritance. That so for example, they've had things like which they call hariq al-yad or al-kadwa si'aya, that a wife is entitled to 50% of the inheritance before the inheritance is split up. We would never have heard of these kind of views. In Egypt, you would have fatwa of Ramadan, the timings being different. You would have, in Tunis, you would have different fatwa. In Libya, okay, Libya now is a mess, but in Sudan, in Mali, in all of these things, we are not at all. Let's face it. Okay, somebody said for the moon sighting, we look at Morocco, but that's different. We're just looking at the moon appearing there. We're not actually following Morocco per se in their understanding of Islam. We're just following our own understanding of Islam, but just viewing the moon when it shows in Morocco because it happens to be the nearest Muslim country to the UK. But we do not follow Morocco. Most of their ulama shave or have very short beards. Egypt, Tunis, Libya, most of the ulama across these countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, most of the Muslims there, they shave, they wear suits, they've been doing this for decades and decades. Turkey, we are not influenced by them at all. We don't even care. You know, I remember once telling one of my sheikhs that, a Syrian alim, a great alim who wrote a Hanafi book, Sheikh Sagharji, you've probably heard of him, Fiqh al-Hanafi wa adillatuhu. I told him, this was in Pakistan, I said, Sheikh, have you come across al-Fiqh al-Hanafi wa adillatuhu? And he said, I've heard of it. Who wrote it? I said, it's Sheikh Sagharji. I think it's As'ad al-Sagharji. And he's from, he's from Syria. And he said, acha. He goes, then I bet he probably doesn't have a beard. I said, well, at the time I hadn't seen Sheikh Sagharji. I said, I'm not really so sure. I haven't really seen him. He said, wo to वैसे भी. He goes, उसके साथ साथ कभी कुछ he goes कभी कुछ पी लेते भी होंगे. To them I'm sure alcohol is fine as well. I thought, whoa, just chill out. I mean, why are you so judgmental about these people? This is a great sheikh, for God's sake. You know, you don't even know the sheikh. Look, you don't even know who he is, and you're just like, you know, just completely slating him because you don't, you know, like, acha, so I bet he drinks alcohol as well. It's like, oh, is he from the UK? Oh, then I guess he must also be a cocaine addict as well. It's like, what the, wow, how did you make that leap? I mean, I don't. So we here have to understand that when people say, and in Pakistan, the madaris system that produces ulama is only really stems from three sources, three strings. In Pakistan, there are hundreds of thousands of madrasas, with maybe 1 million or a few million ulama in Pakistan. Where do they come from? Really just three sources. Three sources is the only thing. That is the Brelvi madrasa, the Deobandi madrasa, and the Ahlul Hadith madrasa. Which, okay, most producing of ulama, probably generally, and I could be wrong in this, but I assume are the Deobandi ones in Pakistan. Because they are very more kind of like madrasa oriented, although the Brelvis are probably the majority in people. Now, that mindset, the Brelvis in Pakistan are usually a bit less Puritan than the Deobandis, but they're still from Pakistan, so they've still got that way of thinking. Like, if you should kill somebody if he says something against the Prophet. No, you should not. You know, and it's amazing how on this view, on this opinion, both the Deobandis and the Brelvis decide to debunk Imam Abu Hanifah, who they follow in everything, and he's the one Imam who very clearly said, no, you cannot touch somebody for, you know, for abusing the Prophet. And they say, well, you know, on this thing, Imam Abu Hanifah, just step aside. So, and Saudi Arabia, and so these two things are very Puritanist. Now, these countries, and especially Pakistan, and especially the Deobandi way of thinking, and I'm not dissing it, I've been to a Deobandi madrasa, I've been to a Brelvi madrasa, I've been to a Ahl Hadith madrasa, and my teachers are from all, and I love and respect them all. But they then, the madaris in the UK, which produce probably 500 ulama every year, and in America, the main madaris are set up by Deobandi scholars, which are just the same thread from Pakistan. So when you ask, why am I explaining this to you? So when you ask, people ask me, why is your thinking different to what we're hearing from a lot of ulama? It's different, my friend. Mis amigos, it's different, right? Escúchame, listen to me. It's different because they are reflecting just an isolated way of thinking. And that is the thinking of Pakistan or the thinking of Saudi Arabia. And look, I love and respect the madaris. I'm not anti-madaris, but I do believe that the madaris system needs to be rejuvenated. It needs to be kind of updated. It needs an update. It needs madaris 2.0, 2.0. Look, people like Maulana Qasim Nanotwi, who set up the Deobandi Madaris system in India, many, 125 or 30 years ago, whenever he did it. In his time, Maulana Qasim Nanotwi Sahab, what he did was said, okay, he actually put as a mandatory subject Sanskrit, which is the old Hindu language. And all students need to study Sanskrit. Why do they need to study Sanskrit? Sanskrit wasn't important in their time. The British were still ruling. It wasn't, it was either English or Urdu, or Hindustani, which was just Urdu written in Hindi script, Devanagari. Why Sanskrit? Because he was thinking that, look, times are changing. And you need to be prepared for any change. And the majority of the people in this country are Hindu, and their roots lie in Sanskrit. So we should be acquainted with Sanskrit. Today, Muslims today, forget the Sanskrit part, they're still running on his model of in the UK, goddammit. They're running on that model from 125 years ago from the British Raj. That is, right, that is so out of order. So, and the same goes with, look, the same goes with people like, you know, like where you could say Ahmad Raza Khan, Brailvi Saab and other people who in their time, okay, certain things, you know, they weren't obviously leading scientist pioneers, but they were forward thinking for their time, Remember, you're trying to think how forward they are from our time, but you've got to go back to the British Raj and then see they're ahead of their time. People from the Ahlul Hadith movement, like, you know, like you're going to have Nazir Hussain, Maulana Nazir Hussain, very forward thinking for his time. So we need to do the same for our time. The Madaris system needs to be rejuvenated. It needs to be kind of fused in with modern contemporary academic thought. It needs to be taught critical thinking. This needs to be encouraged. There's a method of teaching which is called confessionalism. Confessionalism, which I know it gets the name from Christian teachings, but it's a method of teaching. And what confessionalism is that whatever I teach you, you just adopt it like doctrine. Like I can teach you debates, I can teach you anything, but you are just simply to absorb everything I say. You are not to question anything. This method is called confessionalism, and this is the current method of teaching in all of these madaris system. In all of them. All of these is taught by the methodology of confessionalism. Now then, so when people ask me, look, why is your thinking different? How come your opinions are different to these ulama? That's because really all these ulama are just like one person. They're just so many of them, but they all just say the same thing. That's all. But whereas if you looked at ulama from Egypt, if you looked at ulama from Tunis, if you looked at ulama from Morocco, if you looked at ulama from, they would be saying different things. And I'm not saying all the people in that country are saying different things, but you will find diversity amongst them. Anyway, people, what a session, what a session. Look at that, Abu Mu'adh is on there, people. Everybody who meets Abu Mu'adh seems to suggest he's my brother. Which has got me wondering. And so I'm going to have to ask my parents and grandparents about that. My grandparents are no more, may Allah bless them. But right, so... Right. The Uthaymeen video. Okay, very quickly. Look. There was a video by Sheikh Uthaymeen on the differences of this opinion, the differences within this ummah, not Rahmah, and he quotes a verse of the Quran. This way of thinking has been expressed before Uthaymeen by other Salafiyah or that kind of way of thinking. Why they say this is because for them it is important, like in order to show that they are the successful Firqatun Najiyah, the saved sect. Others can't be true. So it's the only way. Like if they say all differences need to be incorporated, then obviously it kind of does away with their other claim to salvation. So it's important for them. So what they say is, oh, if this hadith were true, and I accept the hadith is weak, that if ikhtilaf ummati rahmah, that the ikhtilaf of my ummah is a rahmah. Now, they say the hadith is weak, but they say if that hadith was true, then the opposite meaning, that its unity is a punishment. Because if its difference, if its dissent is a blessing, if its diversity is a blessing, then its unity must be a trial or tribulation. But look, that's where you would just simply say to them, well, my friend, thank you, my friend. But at this point, your logic is, you see, this is where you say to them that, well, that understanding, my friend, is above your pay grade. Look, that's not true. The majority of this ummah has always commented that you do not take adverse rulings from all hadith. When you take an adverse ruling, it has to first of all complement the entire usul of Islam. Okay, so it does not, you do not take adverse rulings in everything. Okay, so for example, if so in the Quran, Allah is saying, "Innama sadaqatu fi," that sadaqat are in these things. That indeed, surely sadaqat is in these. Does that mean there can be sadaqah in nothing else? Of course it doesn't. It's just prioritize. So you do not have to take an adverse meaning from everything. Okay. So when Allah says in the Quran to Musa or to other prophets that وَلَا تَكُنْ أَوَّلَ كَافِرٍ بِي, do not be the first to disbelieve. Does that mean you could say, okay, is it okay to be the second to disbelieve then? Or the last? I'm not the first, I'm the second. You know, Allah said don't be the first. So you don't take an adverse ruling from everything. Okay. Secondly, Imam Malik, the Don people, the Don of Medina, when he was asked by the caliph to make a book which will be imposed on everybody, and this was his opportunity to force his way onto everyone. Imam Malik said, and this is his fatwa, people, it's his ruling. He said that the ashab, the companions of the Prophet, dispersed into the lands after him. وَاخْتَلَفُوا, and they disagreed. So it is not from our tradition to force them onto one way of thinking. You see, so this is the true salaf of this ummah. Okay, Imam Malik, the way of Medina. Imam Abu Hanifah, when he was asked that man a'lamun nas, who is the most knowledgeable of this ummah of people, who is the most knowledgeable, he said a'lamuhum wa absaruhum, he said the most insightful, باختلاف الناس إذا اختلفوا, the most insightful amongst them regarding the differences of people when they have disagreed. Right, so people, with that, I'm going to leave you to it. There's a salam from Pakistan. Wa alaikum as-salam, barkhudar. Right there, I'll leave you to it, inshallah. People, if you need to reach out to me, you can do so. Right, so if you're on Facebook and you haven't liked my page, God damn it, like the page, share it, like it. If you need to reach out to me, message me. I do try to get back to your messages. If you're on Twitter, you can add me. It's same Mufti Abu Layth. If you're on Snapchat, it's Malm 2014, MALM 2014. Add me. You can send me your questions. I do try to respond. This coming week, I'm going to take a break, people. So, so this coming week we won't have a session, so you can catch up on previous sessions, inshallah. Let me take a break, huh? That's what I'm talking about, people. Right, somebody said Jesus is the only way. Alright, I am the light, and none shall reach the Father except through me. Amen, amen, people. Hallelujah. Right, so I'll leave you with that, people. Take very good care of yourselves, inshallah. وسبحان الله وتعالى عما يصفون وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على القائل الممنون المدينة خير لهم إن كانوا يعلمون والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.